Okay, can folks see the presentation? Yeah, okay, great, excellent. So yeah, as Sloan mentioned, I'm Lynn Munno. I'm the director of Watersheds United Vermont. And we are really excited to talk with you all today about watershed groups and the important work that groups are doing for clean water and healthy and resilient watersheds. And I'll be joined by from my colleague, Christian Pelletier, who also works for Watersheds United Vermont and for the White River Partnership. And then, as Sloan mentioned, we have Kate Kelly from the Lewis Creek Association, Michelle Braun from Friends of the Winooski River, and Mary Rust from the White River Partnership, who will be joining us. I will just do a little quick bit about WUV and watershed groups overall. Then I'll turn it over to Kate, Michelle, and Mary to introduce themselves and their groups, give some project and program highlights. We'll have Christian just do a little bit more on watershed groups overall, as well as WUV's grant programs. And then Mary, Kate, and Michelle will share a bit about how folks can get involved, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So hopefully we can get through all of that. And yeah, so Watersheds United Vermont, or WUV as we call ourselves, we are an association of community-based watershed groups across Vermont. And our mission is to empower community-based watershed groups in all parts of the state to protect and restore Vermont's waters. And WUV was founded in the aftermath of Tropical Storm Irene, when watershed groups and partner organizations realized more than ever the importance of connecting across watersheds. Watershed groups had been working for decades, and the opportunities to connect across watersheds to learn more about best practices, common challenges, and really have an opportunity to work with each other. So WUV really focuses on three main areas. The first, to support, connect, and represent. So in terms of the support aspect, WUV works to provide information, resources, and training to watershed groups and partner organizations across the state. And that largely, over the last 5 years, a lot of that has been focused on administering our sub-grant programs to make sure that we have resources to groups to do all of the great restoration and protection work. And Christian, again, will talk more about that later. Connect. Super important to make sure that we're encouraging collaboration and connection among watershed groups and with our partner organizations. And lastly, to represent, to really WUV works to try to provide a voice and representation for watershed groups at the state level. So I keep saying watershed groups, and you'll hear more from watershed groups in a minute, but while watershed groups vary in terms of the scope and exact activities they work on, there are some fundamental similarities between all the watershed groups. Watershed groups are community-based organizations that work with individuals and communities in their local watersheds, in their home watersheds, to protect and improve water quality, habitat, flood resilience, and to build those social and ecological connections between people and Vermont's waters. And really importantly, we think of watershed organizations as groups that work with all watershed constituents and don't represent a specific constituency or interest group. And fundamentally, WUV believes that the focus on watershed groups is really important, and making sure that these groups have the resources, representation, and recognition they need, because the local groups have that really important local expertise, the connection within their communities, and again, that focus on the representation of everyone in the watershed. We also think that thinking at that watershed scale is really important, that holistic approach to watershed management beyond that water's edge. So really thinking of our units, not just as towns or counties or states, but really by those watershed boundaries. And thinking about that full range of benefits that I know many of you on the call care about, including water quality, aquatic and riparian habitat, flood resilience, aquatic organism passage, and watershed health. So groups work across all of those multiple benefits as they're working on restoration and protection work. And again, we really feel strongly that as a connected network, local groups are more impactful in their watersheds when we're all working together. So a little bit, I know that I think there are a number of other watershed groups on the call today, and just that we have watershed groups that are working in all 4 of the major basins in Vermont: the Memphremagog Basin, the Connecticut Basin, the Hudson Basin, and the Lake Champlain Basin. And you'll see that we'll hear from three of those groups today. And then lastly, I just wanted to say that we can't do this work without all of the amazing partners that we work with, including the DEC staff. Thank you all. And that collaborations and partnerships are critical for tackling these complex challenges that we have, and often sort of large restoration projects that people are working on. So I listed some of the partners here, and it takes all of us to get this work done as we're working towards clean water and healthy and resilient watersheds. And at that, I'll turn it over so you can hear more specifically from our groups that are actually doing the work on the ground. And I think I'm first turning it over to Kate Kelly from the Lewis Creek Association.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. So I'll give just a brief introduction to LCA, and then I will turn it over to our other groups to give their brief spiel. So here at Lewis Creek Association, as our name implies, we work in the Lewis Creek watershed. Lynn, if you want to flip to the next slide, that would be great. We also work in the La Platte River watershed, which drains into Shelburne Bay and Lake Champlain. And finally, we also cover the direct to lake drainages, so those smaller watersheds that drain out sort of in between the La Platte River, which is in green, and the sort of blue-green color, the Lewis Creek watershed. So that's Holmes Brook, Kimball, and Thorpe Brooks in those direct to lake areas, sort of in between Shelburne and North Ferrisburg. Next slide. So our mission is to protect, maintain, and restore ecological health while promoting social values that support sustainable community development in these watersheds that we work in. And we do a variety of work, including conservation and restoration. So that includes tree planting, stormwater management, restoration work like wetland and floodplain restoration, and invasives removal. We also work in the areas of data collection and planning. So that includes our water quality sampling and collecting data on water quality, stream geomorphic assessment data, and planning for projects. And then we also do some education and outreach with visits to schools, presentations to our towns, commissions, and neighborhoods. So you'll hear a little bit more about the breadth of work that we do here in a minute, but for now I will turn it over to, I believe it's Michelle at Friends of the News. Mary at White River Partnership.
Thanks, Kate. Hi everyone, Mary Russ. I'm the director of the White River Partnership. A few pictures of why we're inspired to do this work. It's a lovely watershed, and our work started in 1996 when a group of folks got together and said, wow, we have a really nice place to live. How do we keep it this way? Next slide, please. It's a map of the watershed. The white is part of the Connecticut River drainage, and it's 56 miles long. It's a fairly large watershed, maybe not as big as the Winooski, 710 square miles, and it's the longest undammed tributary to the Connecticut River. So pretty special in the Connecticut River drainage for not having any dams on the main stem. Next slide, please. And our mission is to really bring people together, to work together to improve the health of the watershed. We all have a role in contributing to the health of the watershed, and we can all participate in making it a better place to live, or keeping it a great place to live. And like Kate, we work in 3 areas. We do restoration work. Many of the programs are similar: planting trees, removing structures, improving habitat. We engage people in the work through our stewardship program. Here's some folks doing river cleanups. There's never a shortage of trash to clean up in our rivers, as well as many other things, which I'll talk about later. And then we have an education program, both engaging people in the work, letting them know what we're finding, and specifically bringing kids out to the river to train up the next generation of folks who live in our watershed. and do this work. And I'll turn it over to Michelle.
Thanks, Mary. So the Friends of the Winooski River formed similarly to the other groups in the early 90s with just folks who came together and said, what can we do to help this watershed be cleaner, healthier, and more resilient? It was initially an all-volunteer group, but we hired a part-time coordinator pretty quickly and have now reached 3 full-time professional staff. Lynn, can you go to the next slide? Which is good because, as Mary alluded, we have a very large area. The main stem is 90 miles long with 7 major tributaries. The watershed is over 1,000 square miles. And because of its unique history, the river actually precedes the rising of the Green Mountains. So it has formed an important travel corridor throughout time. And hence you see we have some of the larger settlements in the region, and almost a third of the population of the state lives in this watershed. So we have our work cut out for us in helping all of those folks achieve their goals for a clean, healthy, and resilient watershed. Lynn, do I have another slide? Nope. Okay. So we do a similar array of activities. We serve as a resource for watershed residents to learn about the watershed, including managing the largest water quality monitoring program in the state. We do a lot of restoration work, from planting trees to replacing culverts, removing dams, stormwater retrofit projects, and river cleanups also. And we support recreation. We have a couple of paddling events. We do public access site improvements and all kinds of stuff. We try to respond to our community's needs and interests. And right now that does mean quite a bit of work on flood resilience as well. Back to Kate, I think.
Thanks, Michelle. Okay, so I'm going to kick off sort of the more detailed section, I guess, of this presentation, where each of our groups will discuss some of the projects that we've been involved with and how that relates to both the Clean Water Fund and flood resilience. So I'm going to start with 3 different projects, which are all part of our Ahead of the Storm demonstration sites, which are a series of sites throughout mostly the La Platte River watershed, but we do have a few in the Lewis Creek watershed. And the idea here is that these sites demonstrate or show optimal conservation practices and ways that folks can steward the land in a better sort of ideal way. The idea here is that we're not only meeting the current water quality standards and permit needs, but also surpassing them when the conditions on the site allow. So this really helps as a way to deal with climate change, larger storm events, flooding, and for most of these sites, it will allow them to be able to treat these larger volumes of stormwater that we're seeing with these large rain events that we've been getting, as we've all seen in the last few years. So the first site is the one that I have a photo of here. This is in Heinsberg. You're looking up at United Church of Heinsberg, which is right on Route 116, if you've ever traveled through Heinsberg. So behind the church is essentially a formerly converted wetland. It was used as an agricultural field and then as a playing field for years. And it was always very wet, like almost unusable as a playing field. And so this past year, we were able to use state clean water funds to both design and implement a wetland restoration on this site. So essentially the field was turned over, dug up, tilled. There was a new channel created where you can see sort of the little bridge, if you will, over the channel in the forefront of that photo. There were logs and rocks placed to kind of help slow down and spread out the water as it comes down through that wetland. And then, of course, the site was planted and seeded as well. So this project is nearly complete. We have a little bit more work to do this coming year. There's currently a berm that's holding water into a swale that comes down off the hillside that you can kind of see in the back of the photo. And so once this site is established and the seeds and wetland plants have all grown, we'll be able to remove that berm and allow the water to flow through this restored wetland, where it will be cleaned up and sort of filtered, and the wetland will be able to absorb some of that water before it heads downstream and hits the La Platte River. So that's a really exciting project. I'm excited to get it finalized and see the water come into the site and get cleaned up before it heads downstream. Right now it goes through this ditched area with several 90-degree turns before it reaches the river. So that's really exciting. So that's number one, nice wetland restoration in Heinsberg. Next slide, please. The next one is a site, this is in Starksboro, sort of in the headwaters of the Lewis Creek. Well, it's headwaters of a tributary to Lewis Creek. So this is Hollow Brook. It comes down out of the hills in Starksboro, and it spreads out in sort of an alluvial fan area. And unfortunately, in that area where it's trying to spread out, there's also a manufactured home community. So there's been a lot of like historic changes to this stream, a lot of, work trying to keep the stream where it is right now. So berms, an old road that crossed the stream, which is what you're looking at on the left photo. Those concrete blocks that are on the edge of the stream, and then there's actually concrete in the base of the stream as well, was an area where a bridge crossed the stream decades ago. They took the bridge out, but they left the concrete blocks. And because of those blocks and the sort of constriction in the river, when it flooded, would jump right out of the banks and flood the mobile home park, which is sort of on the right side of your screen. So we began this work with state clean water funds for the concept design work. And then the final design and implementation funding actually came through the Flood Resilient Communities Fund in partnership with Addison County Regional Planning Commission. So the work was to essentially remove those concrete blocks and all the concrete that was in the stream to kind of excavate and create a new floodplain for this brook. So, where it has space now to spread out when it floods. The photo on the right side of the screen is that restored floodplain with seeds and plants, and we're excited because it's not only good for the stream in that it's able to have a little more space to move around like it wants to, but it's also good for the community that lives there and really prevents that flooding from getting up into the mobile home park, washing out roads and homes. Okay, so next slide, please. And then the final project here is essentially a rain garden or a bioretention area at a private residence. This project was completed quite a while ago, so it was before really the Clean Water Fund had a lot of money in it. So most of this was funded through either private donations or other grants. But essentially what's happening here, you're looking at a photo on the upper left of the area before the rain garden was put in. Water would come down the roadside swale and off the road and flood these folks' driveway, garage, walkway into the house. There was really nowhere for that water to go. This was sort of the low settling point in their front yard. So we were able to design and create a rain garden right along sort of the edge of the driveway that now captures the runoff from the roadside swale. It's about 5 acres, a 5-acre drainage area, and allow that water to slow down and spread out and sink into the ground in this beautiful rain garden with lots of pollinator plants. And then from there, it kind of slowly filters out and down through like a dispersed meadow to get down to the brook. So, again, this is related sort of on a much smaller scale to flood resilience on someone's private property. But again, it cleans up that water and prevents the flooding in their driveway and garage. So these 3 projects are just examples of this broader ahead of the storm series of demonstration sites. It looked like one of you dropped into the chat, thank you, the story map that we have on our website that shows the series of sites, and you're welcome to click through and learn a little bit more about the broad variety of sites and work that we've done in past years. So with that, I'll turn it over to our next group.
Thanks, Kate. I want to come visit those sites. Let's make a date.
Yeah, you got it.
All right, so I'm going to highlight a few different types of projects we're working on in the white, also related to flood resilience and clean water. And one of the things that we as groups do is try to find the best place to invest our resources, the best place to invest state resources. And so typically that process starts with figuring out what's out there. What are the opportunities to do the work? So I want to highlight a couple of restoration-based assessments we're doing to figure out where on the landscape is a place to, in this case, do stream crossing replacements, as well as water storage in the headwaters. And so the 2 opportunities here are, we've got a grant to go and look at 375 stream crossing culverts in a section of the watershed. It was really hard hit by the flooding in 2023. Where the data was fairly old. So we don't actually know what culverts are out there, what their condition is, and how small they are relative to the size of the stream. And so here we are gathering data that allows us to understand what are the needs across an entire section of the watershed, sharing that data with folks who think about culverts like towns, as well as state and federal agencies, to start coming up with a strategy for maybe getting ahead of some of the flood damages that we see when the water rises and these culverts fail because they're really too small to handle these larger flood events that we're having. So one project is a stream crossing assessment. Another is a fairly new area for us where, interestingly, where you have beavers, you have a lot of water storage. They create wetlands, often in headwater areas. And it's a really great thing, like Kate is doing in different ways, to keep the water in the areas where it can be absorbed and kept out of rivers. And that helps reduce the overall amount of water in our rivers, improving resilience overall. So we're doing an assessment with the National Forest Service. There's 50,000 acres of the Vermont National Forest in the upper sections of our watershed to find opportunities where, number one, there are beavers, or can improve habitat where it already exists. Where's the opportunity to let beavers come in and do the infrastructure work for us to keep water storage really working for the communities downstream. So it's a really fun project where we go out and get to, hike around in wet meadows in the National Forest, but for the purpose of improving resilience. Next slide. The White River Water Trail program is our sort of our work to create safe recreational access to the river, but it came out of Tropical Storm Irene when we had a ton of damage along the rivers. A lot of private homes were destroyed, washed away, and we were able to work with communities to convert flood damaged properties into publicly accessible access points along the river, and thus began the White River Water Trail. It's now an umbrella program for a lot of the work that we do around safe recreational use. For example, we monitor water quality. We were pleased to help Friends of the Winooski understand impacts to water quality after the 2023 storm. That's the cooler handoff you're seeing there between the 2 organizations. We share those results, so when folks go to the river, they can see the sign, use the QR code to figure out, is it safe to swim here? What do I need to know? The upper right is improving access to the river. So you could roll down that hill before and maybe get to the river. Now you can take a really nice staircase down, and we work with a group of volunteers who help maintain this infrastructure, pick up trash. And of course, as folks have mentioned, there's sort of a never-ending need to keep trash out of the river, which helps improve access as well as water quality. And certainly the need is higher after a storm when lots of things wash in. So this about because of a flood and is really, we think, benefiting the community in a variety of ways. Next. And then finally, school-based education. This is an area that we've invested in almost since the beginning, really raising awareness about the great place we live and all the opportunities to for individuals, for kids and adults, to make a difference. On the left-hand side of the screen is a picture of our freshwater snorkeling program. Yes, you heard that right. We put kids in wetsuits and give them masks and snorkels, and they go under the water and look at fish living in a restored area of the river that was really highly damaged during Tropical Storm Irene. This is a theme for us. Lots of damage in our watershed, but we were able to restore such a stretch of river that provides great habitat and a deep enough pool for kids to snorkel in. It's a great learning opportunity to see how all of this stuff fits together, and again, how individuals can make a difference in improving the landscape. Many of those kids go on to raise trout in the classroom, which is that picture in the center. And then at the end of the year, go out to the river and do some fun stuff as they release the trout. Maybe that they'll see one day, right, when they're snorkeling. So we're really trying to get kids involved in thinking about the river as a system, thinking about their place in it, and really hands-on opportunities to see what individuals can do to make a difference to build a more resilient system. So 3 examples from the White River. I'll turn it over to Michelle.
Okay, so we do many similar things, and I just want to note, for one thing, Mary, you have beautiful photos, and I'm inspired. I need to curate my photos. You all saw the cooler handoff in the previous picture, and that's really credit to WOV for the support that they provide to all of the watershed groups. We are all talking to each other all the time, even across the mountain divide between the Champlain Basin and the Connecticut River Basin. I know that if I have a question, Mary and Kate and Lindsay and Patrick and everybody at the other watershed groups can help me with that. And it's really, really valuable to have that support. So planting trees, I think something that almost all of our watershed groups do. In the last 15 years, we have planted trees using funding from many different sources before the Clean Water Fund began investing in that type of work. So the Basin Program, the Vermont Community Foundation, 350 Vermont, many sources of funding. But now we do primarily use clean water funds as of the last few years. So over 15 years, we've planted 38,000 plants in 19 towns, covering 125 acres with native trees and shrubs. And those have been planted primarily by thousands of volunteers of all ages and all walks of life. It's really rewarding work to work with volunteers to plant these trees. For all of the benefits that they have, they enhance terrestrial habitat, that's for birds and wildlife, and aquatic habitat for fish and turtles and everybody else, insects for sure. They filter stormwater, they intercept stormwater, they reduce erosion, so trees are the best. Lynn? Here's an example of a planting and an example of my not great photo management. The left-hand photo is the Dog River in Northfield in an area that needed planting. And on the right is 3 years after planting. It's now been 3 more years, but I realized that when we go back to sites, we're looking for what's wrong and what we need to work on. And so I have tons of photos of like bare patches where we need to fill in and spots that aren't doing so well. And I need to go back and take some different photos. We've only recently, thanks to the State Clean Water Fund, had funding to go back. We used to just put the trees in and walk away and hope for the best. And now we have access to enhancement funds that are really valuable to help us go back and take care of these sites. Next. So tree planting is a small project that anybody can do. dam removal is a bigger project that takes a lot more time and a lot more money. We have completed one. That's the first one on the list. We have 6 more in design, and we are in the loop on Hands Mill Dam, which was removed by our partners at the Conservation District, and Rouleau Pond, which is in design by BNRC, because this work is really pretty big and complicated for small organizations. And so we do all really work together to support each other going through these complicated projects. Next slide. But we think it's worthwhile to do that level of effort because dam removal has a lot of benefits. It improves overall stream health and stability and restores natural sediment transport, which has the benefit of improving habitat for aquatic organisms. It also opens miles of streams for passage into colder headwaters, which is really important for brook trout in particular. And it lowers flood elevations, sometimes really impressively. Some of the numbers we're seeing on reducing flood risk from dam removal are really impressive. And taking the dam out in a controlled way avoids the damages that can result from dams blowing out in an uncontrolled way, which we saw 5 dams fail in our flooding in 2023. So we want to get them out before that happens. Lynn? And here is an after photo of a dam removed. I think this is a good photo. So, Lynn? A new project type that we're working on is called Strategic Woody Addition, where if you look at the center picture here, we've got a stream that is getting somewhat incised, which means it's disconnected from its floodplain. The stream bed is lowered, which is going to lower the ground table in the area. At this particular site, there's some nice forest fen habitat, and we don't want to see that losing its access to groundwater. So the idea of a strategic woody addition project is you strategically install logs in the river. You can see in the right hand, this is the same stream. At the back of that photo, you can probably just barely see there are a bunch of logs in the river because it is in the forest and trees do fall down. And so we're sort of trying to mimic that, but in an intentional way. And you'll see at the left, the sort of chartreuse blobs there indicate floodplain area that will be reconnected by this project. This work was done by Red Start. We're working together with Red Start to develop some of these strategic woody addition projects. And DEC is also providing a lot of support to us in figuring out how to make these projects both effective and efficient. And I think that is all I have.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. So now this is Christian Pelletier from WOV and WRP, but I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the high-level statistics of the projects that our awesome watershed groups just talked about. In the chat, I put a link to WOV's annual accomplishments report. Our most recent one with compiled data is 2023, and that's going to be the year I'm going to share some stats with you all today, but we'll hopefully have our 2024 accomplishments report out soon with those stats. And every year we're just seeing more projects developed, so the stats just get more and more impressive as we keep doing this great work. So riparian buffer projects, you heard about those earlier, some specific projects. In 2023, our watershed groups planted over 24,000 trees at 44 sites along streams in Vermont. So some really impressive planting statistics. And there's a mix of volunteers used, so almost 200 volunteers used, but there's also some professional planting groups that go out and support this work with our watershed groups as well. Next slide. River cleanups. Once again, you heard about some specific river cleanup efforts that our groups are doing. And I think with flooding events, unfortunately, that increases some of the river cleanup. But even without flooding events, a lot of our watershed groups have programs to do yearly river cleanups, whether it's at the end of the year in September in our River Cleanup Month, or monthly programs that engage volunteers to get them out to the river and pick up that kind of day use trash that you see at a lot of our river access sites. So in 2023, over 25,000 pounds. It's an exciting number because it's huge, but I hate sharing how much trash that we have to pull out. But it's also a great way to engage volunteers. And we've seen hundreds of volunteers mobilized to get trash out of the river, all our rivers across Vermont. Engaging communities, once again, it is awesome to hear how the groups today engaged communities, whether it's education programs or more adult-based engagement activities. But in 2023, our watershed groups engaged over 2,000 students across the state of Vermont, which I think is one of the more powerful numbers that we get lucky enough to combine here at WUV. It's really empowering to see how many students that we can engage for this kind of work. And then over 700 other adults and folks engaged in communities for educational events, workshops, and different trainings that our watershed groups put on. So there's a lot of community engagement work that these groups across the state do. And then restoration projects. Those are some great examples, and I think seeing the complexity and the before and after photos is really what sells how important these projects are. But every year we have so many different restoration style projects being developed, designed, and implemented across the state. And you heard about a bunch of different project types today, but we try and fund as many different eligible clean water project types at WUV as we can. So there's stormwater projects, there's river restoration projects, wetland projects, lakeshore projects. So across all these different project types, we're hoping to see these clean water results. In 2023, we had 10 stormwater projects designed, 5 implemented. And then in our natural resource category of rivers, wetland, lakeshores, we had 15 projects designed and 9 implemented. So you can kind of see by the scale that in the implementation, these are big projects that each group is usually working on maybe 1 or 2 of these big projects to implement a year. And then very similar to our restoration project, and oftentimes these projects I'm going to talk about now also are restoration projects, but we also have projects that focus on improving habitat connectivity and flood resiliency. And so usually those are our culvert replacement projects and our dam removal projects. So on top of having great restoration and water quality benefits, they also have huge benefits for flood impacts and creating good habitat. And so like Mary mentioned, there's a lot of culvert assessment work and it's just growing. But in 2023, we had 30 culverts assessed with 2 culverts replaced. And then we had some dam design work with resulting in 1 dam removed. And once again, I think this aspect of the work is one that's growing the most. And in our 2024 and 2025 accomplishments reports, we're going to have many more culverts and dams assessed, designed, and removed. And so WUV feels really lucky that we get to play a role in helping to support these watershed groups and partners do this work. So I listed a few of our grant programs that help fund this work. And in the chat, I'll put a link to our website where you can see our grant opportunities. But we have riparian buffer planting from DEC. We have our Woody Buffer Block Grant, as well as private funding from an organization called Pure. And then NIFWIF funding that helps support these tree plantings that our watershed groups and partners are doing. For the restoration projects, we have an enhancement, DEC Enhancement Development Design and Implementation Block Grant, which funds those lakeshore, stormwater, floodplain and stream restoration projects. We have a dam removal block grant from DEC. It separates out dam removal project types from the other restoration and habitat projects. So that's a standalone grant program that supports the design and implementation of dams. And then we also have other grants, including our education outreach grant, which is a private funding source that helps support some of the other work you heard about today, like river cleanups, water quality, and community outreach. And then we also have a few other grant programs that you can see on our website, including our Clean Water Workforce Development Capacity Grant. And that doesn't directly fund these projects that you heard about today, but it's a grant that helps our watershed groups and partners build capacity to have the staff to do more of those projects. So it's a really important grant to help empower to do this kind of work. And we also have our tactical basin planning grants that help to support the planning and execution of these projects. So WUB just is really thankful to have this funding, to be able to pass it along to groups and to partner with such great watershed organizations. And I'll pass it over to the watershed groups to do a little wrap up and share some ways you can get involved.
Great. I will keep this brief because I know we're running a little short on time, but our website for LCA is on the screen. We do a variety of other work that involves volunteers, including water sampling, tree planting, invasives removal. This is a boat launch steward that we have stationed at a couple of ponds in the area. Feel free to visit, check out our website, sign up for our monthly newsletter, follow us on Facebook and Instagram. That's my spiel. Next.
Just copy that and insert White River Partnership. Same, we're coming into the season where there's lots to do. I would say in a few weeks here, there's going to be opportunities to get involved. So please check out our website. Similarly, we post opportunities on Facebook and Instagram, and we also have a regular electronic newsletter. So hope to see you out on the White.
Same. Find us on the internet, follow us on social media, sign up for our e-news. We've got lots of stuff happening. Come to our annual dinner in a couple of weeks. We would love to see you.
Great. I think I will. Thank you all so much. That was so great. I know that when we were planning this, like Michelle and Mary and Kay were all like, ooh, we're excited so we can hear about what the other groups are doing. So it's always really fun for us to hear from each other, since we don't usually take time out of our busy days to hear about everyone else's work and projects. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing so that we can move on to any questions people might have. Think I can do this. Hold on. Stop sharing. I think I did it.
Right.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you so much, presenters. That was amazing. We do have a question in the chat from Gianna. And the question is, does WUV aggregate volunteer opportunities from watershed groups, like on a group calendar?
The answer is we do not do that. And I think it's a great idea. So yeah, thanks for that. That's something that we haven't done. We've usually just kind of referred people to the watershed groups themselves, but thinking that mostly people go to the individual watershed group websites rather than WUVs, but I'll definitely talk with groups and see if that would be helpful.
Do we have any other questions? Oh, Gianna. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, sorry. Thank you. Thank you for these presentations and all the really awesome work you all are doing. I am curious about from the state level, we see WUV quite a bit engaging in so much stuff that's happening quite often, and trying to speak for watershed groups, but also finding that difficult sometimes, and sort of how just curious about like the watershed level perspective, watershed group level perspective on best ways to stay in touch on lots of moving things that might be happening at the state level.
Gianna,
Well,
do you?
we do have a group listserv. Are you on the WOV group?
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious how you are finding, where you're finding information and what's useful. Like, I feel like WOV is a fantastic resource for you all, and there's so much coming at you. Like, Quip tries to do our MailChimp as well. So just kind of curious, like, where you find it most valuable to be hearing about, particularly like policy changes and things that are coming out from the state level.
I mean, I think the listserv is helpful, or not the listserv, but the emails that you guys put out with, you know, information like updated manuals or whatever. I think, you know, brief webinars or meetings could be helpful as well, just to explain in person like what those things are so that we don't have to go read a 50-page document or whatever.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. And I feel like one great thing about WOV and the updates themselves is that it's curated. So I know it's a lot of work, but when important things come, I know if I read that one newsletter, I'm not going to miss anything. So that's how valuable that resource is to me as a watershed group. It saves us a lot of time. I'm also subscribed to the DEC, you know, updates and whatnot. And I try to skim those as well. But I'll be honest, I feel like if it's important, Lynn's going to let me know. Sorry, Lynn, no pressure.
No, I'll take this opportunity to give a shout out to Toby Schulman, who's WOV's third staff person, who's I think on the call, who is the curator of the listserv information. So thank you, Toby, for pulling that together. Any other questions or other thoughts that I think there's some other watershed groups on the call. Any other questions or thoughts that people have?
Not a oh, it's a question regarding one of the comments, but somebody mentioned that it would be great if there was a Vermont version of the BTCV, and another question of what is the BTCV? I think Dean Pierce mentioned that, if anyone wants to give some clarification.
British Trust for Conservation Volunteers. It's just an organization that existed in the UK for decades that works on a national level, and you can plug into volunteer opportunities across the whole of the UK, or could at least at one point.
That's super interesting. And we have a question from Todd. I'd like to unmute.
For the watershed organizations that are not aware of dam removal projects, we have a dam task force in Vermont. I think there's like 47 people on the dam task force, and plenty of people who could give you some information on that. I can send you, I've got some small PDFs, one pagers, a 10-step, one-page dam removal project. Karina Daly, Vermont Natural Resources Council, is the chair. Reach out if you have any dam removal projects that you want to pursue, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. We actually, I think a number of you maybe were there, but we had the pleasure of a group of us pulled together a barrier removal workshop in December. That was really exciting because it had 3 tracks of focus, one for project managers like watershed groups, conservation districts, other folks who are doing the dam removal projects, a track for the engineers, and a track for the construction contractors. And that was actually recorded. So to Todd's point, if people have interest in learning more, we can provide the link to all of the recordings of those sessions.
And just want to flag to Toby in the chat listed his email. So if you have any items that would be relevant to the WOV listserv, please send them his way.
I'll just add that there are areas of the state that don't have watershed organizations. So if we have anyone on the call who is in one of those areas and particularly interested, I'm sure any of us would be happy to chat with you about our work and, how you might get involved either in your local organization or maybe with starting your own in your own watershed.
In the Lamoille River watershed, please, if anyone on this call is in the Lamoille River watershed, they could use a watershed group.
Yeah, Gianna.
Lynn, were you going to say something there?
I was just going to say that I think that Peter from the Lamoille Conservation District would agree with that. That could use some help in the Lamoille.
I know we're almost out of time, and I know that not all of you were working in the 90s when your watershed groups were formed, but I do wonder if you've observed any changes in sort of enthusiasm or challenges with sort of like community-driven watershed work. Recognizing that like maybe in the 90s there was a lot of enthusiasm for creating groups, and what you've observed to date on any changes there.
Yeah, I'll jump in and I'll say that I was not involved pretty soon after the 90s, 2001. But I think that the biggest difference that I've seen, number one, all the people who were involved in starting the partnership are still involved to the extent they're in the area, which I think is great. So these passion projects are really well supported once they're started, and have some success. But what I've really seen is a real organization around how this work happens is very like, oh, look, there's an eroding bank, we should do something over there, to now like, oh, well, there's a system for doing that, and it's well supported. So I feel like a group of people in the Lamoille, wink wink, who want to think about doing this work, it's much easier to do it now than it probably was in the 90s. And really the key piece to that is finding people who are passionate about it and willing to sort of collaborate on getting it started.
Michelle or Kate, any noticeable
Yeah.
changes on that?
I was part of the founding of this group in the early 90s, so it's a little weird, but I did go away and do other things and then come back more recently. And yeah, definitely to Mary's point, the infrastructure is much greater than it was at that time. And everything, there's a lot more emphasis on prioritization and that kind of thing. Pros and cons to that. So yeah, things have changed a lot over time, for sure, in many, many ways.
And I guess I'll just say, even in the time that I've been with WOV, which is getting on almost 10 years, it's been really wonderful to see the change in the partnership with the Department of Environmental Conservation as well, and the support from the state in terms of the Clean Water Fund and the Clean Water Initiative program. I think it's allowed us to shift and change and invest more resources in this work, which I think means it's also the watershed organizations have been able to grow, and just lots of different issues that everyone is tackling. So thanks to all those partnerships for allowing that to happen.
And I think that's a really fantastic note to end on. We are at time, but I want to thank all of our presenters for your amazing talks, and thank you all for coming as attendees as well. And you will all be seeing a follow-up email with recording, the link to the YouTube and slides and everything. Oh my gosh, we didn't do the poll. So if we're still around, I'm gonna do the poll really quickly, and I would so appreciate your response for my AmeriCorps reporting purposes. But I'm gonna launch that right now. Thank you for hanging around. But should be live now.
Thanks for organizing us, Sloan. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.